Boulder, Colorado. Christmas night, 1996. Snow blanketed the quiet suburban streets, lights still twinkled from rooftops, and the Ramsey family had just finished celebrating the holidays. But by the next morning, their lives, and the nation, would be shattered. That morning, December 26, Patsy Ramsey awoke early. Around 5:30 a.m., she descended the spiral staircase of their 7,000-square-foot home to the kitchen. There, at the bottom of the stairs, she found a piece of paper. A ransom note. The note was 2.5 pages long, handwritten in block letters. It began. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business but not the country that it serves. It demanded $118,000 for the safe return of 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey, the youngest daughter of John and Patsy. The note was oddly specific. The ransom amount exactly matched the bonus John had received that year from his company, Access Graphics. Patsy screamed. Chaos followed. John rushed downstairs. Then they realized something worse. JonBenét was gone. The Ramseys dialed 911 at 5:52 a.m. The call was brief. Patsy's voice was frantic. Police arrived within minutes, followed by friends, neighbors, and a local pastor, all rushing to the home to support the family. But in doing so, they unknowingly contaminated a crime scene. Officers conducted a basic search of the house. They looked around, but no one thoroughly examined the basement. JonBenét was officially declared missing. No sign of forced entry. No broken windows. No disturbance, except for that note, left neatly on the stairs. Police told the Ramseys not to touch anything and to wait for the kidnapper's call. But no call ever came. Hours passed. Tension grew. And then, shortly after 1 p.m., Detective Linda Arndt asked John Ramsey to do a top-to-bottom search of the house. He started with the basement. Within minutes, he opened a small, obscure room off the main basement hallway, a windowless space known as the wine cellar. Inside, he found the body of his daughter. JonBenét was lying on the cold concrete floor, covered by a white blanket. Her wrists were tied above her head with nylon cord. Her mouth was duct-taped. A crude homemade garrote, a ligature made of rope and a broken paintbrush, was wrapped tightly around her neck. She had been dead for hours. John picked up his daughter's body and carried her upstairs. At that moment, the case shifted, from a kidnapping to a homicide. But the crime scene was now irreversibly compromised. First responders were unprepared. Detectives had allowed friends and family to move freely through the house. Evidence had been touched, moved, and cleaned. Critical time had been lost. The behavior of the Boulder Police Department that morning drew criticism almost immediately. Despite arriving promptly, officers allowed the Ramseys' friends to roam freely throughout the home, contaminating what should have been a sealed crime scene. At one point, they even encouraged John and a friend to search the house, a decision that led directly to the discovery of JonBenét's body. Crime scene protocol was all but ignored, and vital evidence may have been lost forever in those first few hours. John's discovery of JonBenét's body also raised serious questions. She was found in a little-known storage room in the basement, a room so tucked away that even some family friends didn't know it existed. Yet John located her there within minutes of beginning his search. He immediately picked up the body and brought it upstairs, cradling her in his arms. This act, though human and deeply emotional, destroyed the integrity of the crime scene and made it nearly impossible to determine how the body had been originally positioned. Police officers on the scene noted how calm John appeared. Not emotionless, but composed in a way that seemed unnatural given the horror he had just discovered. Patsy, on the other hand, was reportedly hysterical and inconsolable. These contrasting reactions became the subject of much debate. Were they genuine grief responses from two parents in shock? Or were they strategic reactions, carefully calibrated to deflect suspicion? Adding to the confusion was the Ramseys' immediate refusal to cooperate fully with police. Instead of sitting for formal interviews, they hired lawyers and media consultants. They gave interviews to CNN before they gave statements to detectives. This choice, they later claimed, was out of fear of being falsely accused, but to many, it seemed like an admission of guilt. As public sympathy began to shift, the Ramseys found themselves under a spotlight that grew harsher by the hour. The autopsy revealed that JonBenét had died from asphyxiation due to strangulation. There was also a skull fracture consistent with blunt force trauma, an 8.5-inch fracture along her right parietal bone. She had also likely been sexually assaulted, though the evidence was inconclusive. There was no definitive match to semen, but injuries suggested some form of penetration had occurred. The autopsy deepened the mystery. There were pineapple pieces in JonBenét's stomach, suggesting she had eaten it shortly before death. A bowl of pineapple with Patsy and Burke's fingerprints was found in the kitchen. But neither parent recalled feeding it to her. The timeline grew hazier. In the days that followed, the nation was stunned. JonBenét had been a child beauty queen, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, frequently photographed in elaborate costumes and makeup. She had been featured in multiple pageants, sometimes singing and dancing for audiences of adults. These images, broadcast nonstop by the media, fueled a public obsession with the case. To some, the pageant photos felt unsettling. To others, they added to the tragedy. JonBenét wasn't just a child murder victim, she was a symbol of innocence, youth, and controversy. Attention quickly turned to the parents. John and Patsy Ramsey hired attorneys within days. They also hired a media consultant and a private investigator. They cooperated with police, but on their terms. Critics argued the Ramseys were uncooperative. Law enforcement believed they were shielding something. Friends claimed the Ramseys were being wrongly targeted by a botched investigation. Boulder police, overwhelmed and underprepared, made early mistakes that would haunt the case forever. The ransom note became a centerpiece of suspicion. It was unusually long. Most real ransom notes are brief and to the point. It was written using a pen and notepad found inside the Ramsey home. Experts determined the note was likely written after JonBenét was already dead. Forensic linguists and handwriting analysts dissected every word. The phrasing was strange. "We are a small foreign faction. Don't try to grow a brain. It's up to you now, John." Some phrases appeared to echo lines from movies like Speed and Dirty Harry. Was it a copycat? A cover-up? Or someone trying to sound like a movie villain? Multiple samples of Patsy's handwriting were compared to the letter. The match was inconclusive, but suspicious. The letter took over 20 minutes to write, based on analysis. Why would a kidnapper take that kind of time inside a house? Then there was the window. In the basement, a small broken window was found. Initially, police believed it could be the intruder's entry point. John Ramsey later stated he had broken it himself months earlier after locking himself out of the house. But dust and spiderwebs in the frame suggested it hadn't been disturbed recently. No footprints were found in the snow outside. But weather records later indicated there was minimal snow cover in some areas of the yard, meaning an intruder could have entered without leaving prints. Still, many believed the scene pointed inward, not outward. Patsy was asked to take a polygraph. She refused. John did too. Their attorneys cited emotional trauma. Later, both took private polygraphs that claimed they were truthful. But the damage had been done. Public suspicion grew. Then there was Burke. JonBenét's older brother was 9 years old at the time. Initially, he was shielded from interviews. His parents claimed he slept through the entire night and didn't know anything had happened until the next morning. But decades later, during a 2016 television special, former investigators alleged Burke may have played a role in the death, possibly striking JonBenét during an argument over pineapple or a toy. That theory set off another firestorm. CBS aired a documentary suggesting Burke killed his sister accidentally, and the parents covered it up. Burke sued CBS for defamation. The lawsuit was settled for an undisclosed amount. Despite the official stance that Burke had slept through the entire ordeal, critics questioned that claim. The house wasn't small, it had 3 floors, but the events of that night were loud, chaotic, and prolonged. From the time of the alleged kidnapping to the police arrival, doors were slammed, phones were used, people were shouting. Could a curious 9-year-old really sleep through all of that undisturbed? Investigators also noted that Burke's demeanor in the days following the murder seemed strangely calm. In a police interview conducted shortly after the crime, he appeared more interested in playing with a toy than in discussing his sister's death. Years later, during his first televised interview with Dr. Phil, viewers were divided. Some found his awkward smile and evasive answers troubling, while others chalked it up to nervousness and social discomfort. Adding to the confusion was the fact that Burke was not formally interviewed by police until weeks after the murder. The Ramseys, citing trauma and legal concerns, delayed access to him. By the time detectives spoke to the boy, memories could have been altered or shaped by family discussions. That delay, intentional or not, made a clear timeline of events even harder to pin down. And then there was the bowl of pineapple. Found on the kitchen table, it was a strange artifact in an otherwise dark and violent story. The bowl contained fresh pineapple and milk. Both Patsy's and Burke's fingerprints were on it, but neither admitted to preparing it. JonBenét's autopsy confirmed she had recently eaten pineapple, suggesting she had been awake after the family returned from their Christmas party, later than her parents initially claimed. This subtle detail added more cracks to the timeline, raising yet another question: who fed JonBenét, and when? Some theorists believe the bowl of pineapple holds the key to the entire case. It's a small detail, easily overlooked, but one that disrupts the official narrative. If JonBenét was awake and in the kitchen after midnight, it would mean someone else was too. And if she was killed shortly afterward, the crime likely occurred while the rest of the family was still awake, not in the dead of night as originally thought. This tiny snack, frozen in time, may be the most overlooked clue in one of America's most baffling murder cases. To this day, Burke maintains his innocence, and has never been named as a suspect by police. Evidence collected at the scene was contradictory and confusing. The DNA found on JonBenét's underwear was not a match for anyone in the Ramsey family. It belonged to an unknown male. But some experts suggested it could have been transferred DNA from the clothing manufacturer. The garrote used in the strangulation was made from a paintbrush belonging to Patsy Ramsey. One part of the brush was used, the other parts were never found. The knots tied in the cord were advanced, possibly indicating the killer had boating or scout experience. The blanket covering JonBenét's body contained fibers from Patsy's clothing. Yet again, inconclusive. Was it simply because they lived in the same house, or something more? A grand jury was convened in 1999. They reviewed hundreds of pieces of evidence and witness testimony. In secret, the jury voted to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey, not for murder, but for child endangerment and obstructing a police investigation. But the Boulder district attorney declined to prosecute, citing insufficient evidence. The Ramseys were never formally charged. The case went cold. For years, no arrests. No new suspects. But the questions never stopped. Public theories exploded, some targeting the family, others pointing to possible intruders, or even ring-based conspiracies. The internet gave rise to armchair detectives, poring over every document, photo, and police interview. JonBenét's grave sits in Marietta, Georgia, next to her mother, Patsy, who died of ovarian cancer in 2006. Her tombstone reads, "Love, purity, joy. A life frozen at 6 years old, a child forever trapped in mystery." More than 25 years later, the case remains one of the most infamous in American history. Despite hundreds of tips, thousands of documents, and endless media coverage, no one has ever been arrested for the murder of JonBenét Ramsey. And that's where Part 2 will pick up: the suspects, the wild theories, the missteps by police, and the DNA evidence that could still blow the case wide open. But for now, we're left with a family torn apart, a community gripped by fear, and a question that has haunted a generation: who killed JonBenét Ramsey?